So what you just saw was worship in a church in the Horn of Africa where our missions team has been for the last couple weeks. This particular church is in a city of about 300,000 people. In fact, it's actually believed that the population is over 300,000. In this city, in this region of this country, they have experienced functionally what has been a civil war during the last 3 to 4 years. And while there is general peace right now, there are military soldiers all over because the potential that unrest could break out again sits very, very high. And in the midst of that city of 300,000 people, there are only 2 evangelical churches. 2. Each of them with a membership of about 100 people. There is another world religion that is dominant in that area. In fact, it's quite oppressive. And on this particular Sunday, I and some of the team went to this church. Pastor Bobby and some of our team went to another church in the major city in that area. And Bobby and I both had the privilege of preaching in those congregations with those church families. In this congregation, the reason we were sent there, we actually did training in one of the largest churches, evangelical churches in the entire country. We did training there, but they sent us out to preach in what they described were the underprivileged churches. And what they meant by that was, while there are not a lot of Americans who go to this part of this particular country, they do have folks who come in from other areas, and they often are preaching at the big church and the big facilities and these kinds of things. And they knew that we came with a real servant heart, that we came to serve, and they actually asked us, would we be willing to go to the churches that nobody wants to go to? And I immediately said, I know Bobby would. Yes, absolutely. And then he's like, well, I know Troy would too. And so, well, there we were. So we were honored to go there. They treated us with such warmth in both of these congregations. In this particular church, one of the things that they said that they were most appreciative of is that during the fighting that occurred in the civil unrest, that while there had been significant looting and a lot of destruction that had occurred, that their church facility had not been looted, burned, or destroyed, and they praised God for that. It was just remarkable. Yeah, it was just a presence gift of the Lord. What you saw there was, and my recording of that was so poor, the volume of it was about 50 times higher in person. I mean, significantly higher. The rejoicing of the people was extraordinary. Do you know how many musical instruments they had that morning? 0. In fact, the person who was supposed to have led worship that morning was driving in and was not able to get there. And this person, this lady, was in essence voluntold instantly and said, you're going to be leading worship this morning. No complaining, no whining, no excuses. Man, we jumped in and worshiped. And like I say, I wish my recording had been so much better that you could have really, really experienced that. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate our church family supporting this team that went, not only in your gifts, but your prayers, your encouragement, the cards you sent, the text and emails that we received at different times. It was just overwhelming for us. We went to the Horn of Africa to be in this particular country. We went there with really 4 purposes, 4 things that we were engaged in and desiring to do. As you know, one of the people working and doing gospel work in this part of the country is one of our former pastors, one of our own, who is now gone and is serving there. And we wanted to be able to go, as we do want to do regularly with all of our partners around the world, and put our arms around them, sit at the table with them, let them know afresh this family, the Rehoboth family, is with them, and that we love them and that we walk with them. And we were able to do that with our partners, and they felt so encouraged, so lifted up, so refreshed, and they expressed that over and over again. A second thing that we wanted to do was they are part of a larger team of gospel workers in that area, and they were that team was having a leadership training meeting time where they were bringing the gospel worker leaders in from 4 different countries plus the country we were in, and they brought all of their children in with them. And you just need to know these people are living in hard places. In all places, not only are they minorities because of their racial, most of them, not all, but most of them because of their racial makeup, but they are living in a place and in places where Christianity is the extreme minority and where Christianity is oppressed in those communities. And almost every one of those families have had their homes broken into. They've had things stolen. They faced real hardships. Some of them have faced the real presence of war. One of them in particular, several disciples that they have seen turn and follow Jesus have all been murdered. And the weight of that is just incredibly heavy. One of the disciples that they had seen supposedly or seemingly professed Christ that they have worked closely with, they were out of town taking care of some matters one day, and that disciple that they've spent so much time with and have had meals with their family broke into their home and stole a bunch of things and stole their vehicle and totaled and destroyed their vehicle. Somebody that they felt so close to and so near to. We had the privilege of doing a camp, basically something similar to like VBS, but all day. And then one day it was all day and most of the night. And I will tell you, your Rehoboth team, I could not be so more proud of them. They did an extraordinary job, yes. This was not a vacation. This was not a tour. This team worked from way early in the morning till way late at night. While not everybody stayed asleep all night long because of the time changes, nobody had trouble falling in bed and collapsing and going to sleep. You just slept like a baby and you were up every 2 hours and walking and pacing the floor. But they did such a tremendous job. Here's what the leadership of our partner organization said to our team and said publicly, that these children are, because they're in such isolated, difficult places, they are brought out with their families 2 and sometimes 3 times a year to be in some camps like this, to give them a chance to be around other children, their own friends and family, to have some refreshing. And here's what the leader said, that the camp that your Rehoboth team led was absolutely the best that they had experienced for some of them ever, and all of them in many, many, many years. And whether it was Marcus doing recreation or Bobby and Ann doing the primary Bible teaching time and doing it with games and all kinds of activities, whether it was Tina and Melita taking care of the youngest, y'all had 2-year-olds to 4, 5-year-olds, and those kids knew two switches on and off, and it was just giddy up and go all the time in there. And then Jade handled music for us and games and just did such a tremendous job doing that. And I did a section that we called Living Boldly for Jesus. In this country, we would call it missions, and there we don't use those terms. And the kids were just engaged. I want you to know the impact that your team had. One of the families had to leave the night of the next to last day. We've got one more day left, and they had to leave that night because they were having to go back to the country in which they serve in. And one of their daughters was headed back from the little living area that they had been in, because we were on something of a compound for this part of it. And she was coming back in order to tell the team goodbye. I happened to be outside talking with some folks, and she sees me and she runs up to me, and she, this is I think she was about 15. She just bear hugs me, and my shirt is literally getting soaked. She is crying so hard because it is so hard for her to say goodbye. And then she comes in and then she talks to the team, and she just wraps them up and expresses her love and gratitude as we, the next 2 days later, are flying out to go to the northern part of the country for a second part of what we were doing. We saw one of the other families headed to the country they were going to, and right there in the airport, their kids are screaming and hollering, and they come attack Tina and Melita, and your team made such an impact on these kids' lives. They encouraged them. They invested the gospel in them. They served them. They were on their hands and knees. They're out. I'll tell you. So Bobby is his age, and let's just say it's been a few decades since he saw his teen years. Well, a lot of decades, but we're not getting too specific. Priscilla stopped aging at 29, but he didn't. And so he is out there with Marcus, and y'all were playing dodgeball or kickball, I don't remember which. Baseball. This makes it even better. He's rounding first base, running wide open like he's Babe Ruth, and he pulls his hamstring. You were not supposed to be doing that. Priscilla made me promise I wouldn't let you. I couldn't stop him. He's like a teenager. Unbelievable what they did. So that was really the second thing we did. The third thing we did was we wanted to encourage the national partners and any of those churches that we worked with. And your team did that in such an amazing way. Our ladies did a Sunday school. They called it Sunday school. Our ladies did a Sunday school training for their children's workers. This one particular church, it is the largest church of this tribe or group of churches in all of this country. And they have about 800 members, just an amazing people of God. They have 800 members, and they have 150 children that they care for every Sunday. And how many children's workers did you say they had? Less than 15 every Sunday morning, caring for 150 children. So our team was able to help them with some very practical things. And it's not that they aren't doing a good job with those children, but they were able to help them with some very practical things, including mobilizing workers. And literally that day, they started mobilizing new workers for their children's ministry, and they immediately saw impact of that. Their leaders spoke to us over and over again about how practical that was. And the men got to be a part of doing missions training with all of their missions leaders and their ministry leaders. And you'd have been so proud of Bobby and Marcus as they shared their stories. And Marcus oversees our facilities ministries here and does a tremendous job with that with his team. And I give you an example. Some of his team was here early this morning. If you had been here at 8 o'clock, you would have thought that a yellow nuclear bomb had gone off as they're out there trying to blow that yellow dust off of the entrances so that you don't walk all in that. And they do such a great job week in and week out. Well, Marcus, his primary role in our team is not a public speaker. He doesn't immediately volunteer for those roles, and I called him up, and Marcus shared his story of how he became a follower of Jesus to that entire group of missions leaders, and just did a great job with that. Bobby had recently come back from Cuba, as many of y'all know. Lord willing, Bobby and I and maybe one or two others of you will be in Cuba later this fall as we're working on some partnership matters there. And Bobby shared about that work. And what's kind of cool, you need to track with this. There are Cuban leaders, apart from the conversations Bobby has been having with them, who have already been talking to some of the leaders in this country about sending Cuban Christian missionaries from their country to this country in the Horn of Africa. Isn't that cool? Isn't that awesome? And so we're going to get to be able to be a part of some of those conversations when we go in the fall and help advance those things as they move forward. And so we were able to encourage not only these existing churches that we connected with, but we went out, some of us were able to do that, and work with workers who are working in our partner that came out of our church. He calls them villages. And I told him, I said, we're going to have to work on this language because some of these villages have 2, 3, 4, and 5,000 people. Well, that's not a village to me. But then when we pop into a place that has 300,000 people and he's still calling it a village, like, yeah, no, this is not a village. Village has like 3 people, a cow, and maybe a road. And so we literally went out and went through town and city out in some of the most rural areas up in the mountains. And you're going to see some pictures here in a few minutes. These are all places dominated by another religion. And most of the ones we passed, 5,000, 10,000, 4,000, 9,000, 15,000, 20,000, there is no known Christian in most of these. There are no churches in most of these. And so where these gospel workers are working, that our partner is working directly with, in the places they've been able to get into so far, they're seeing the mighty hand of God move, and there are new groups and churches and disciples being started at rates that are absolutely extremely amazing. And to see these national partners, their boldness, even when they and their families have been threatened directly, to see their joy, to see their confidence in the Lord when their resources are thin and yet resources aren't stopping them, to see what they're willing to do even physically to take the gospel in places that are hard to get to. We'll show you a picture in just a bit of one of those really, really hard places to even physically get to and what they're doing to make sure that the gospel gets there. And we were able, like they encouraged us more than anything we did with them, but we were able to just pour cool water in their buckets and let them know that this church family stands with them. And we are so incredibly blessed to see and hear what they're doing. And then the last thing that we were engaged with, which is really incorporating all of this, there is a people group that we have talked about that is in the northern part of this area where we actually went out to and saw this. It's a people group where far less than 2% of the entire population of about 500,000 people are followers of Jesus. There are just so few churches among that people group. It is a people group that of their religion, they have been among the most influential in all of the country. And it is a very, very strategic area that we're engaging in. And sometimes we encounter things where people call almost anything missions. We're going to go over and provide food for a group here in Atlanta, or we're going to serve in this group over here, and everything gets called missions. Well, everything truly is ministry, and all of those things are valid and things that we need to do. But missions really is distinct in this one regard. It is taking the gospel to those people who don't have access to the gospel. And that's a real difference. I mean, we're not talking about they've rejected it or they've not said yes. I'm meaning there are no churches among them. There are few, if any, Christians among them. There is nobody inviting them to turn and follow Jesus among them. And if somebody doesn't intentionally go, they will not have that direct opportunity in their lifetime. And that's what we're seeing focused in these partnerships and what we're involved in. We're now going to transition just a little bit in what we're going to share with you this morning. And to our folks who are joining us online, we're so grateful that you have, and we're grateful that you do so week in and week out. Unfortunately, we're going to have to say farewell for this rest of this presentation that we're going to share with you, as what we're going to share is so sensitive, we can't broadcast it. And so if you want to know more, please contact my office, and we would be happy to talk with you directly about what we're sharing in these other regards. But again, we're grateful. Hope to see you in person if there's any way you can do that here soon in our worship service. But we wish you Godspeed as our live stream is going to come to an end at this time.